Chapter 4. Familiar Stranger. It's what photographers call the magic hour on Conch Key. About a half hour ago, the sun dropped below the horizon. A narrow band of bright sky at the horizon bathes Stillwell Fisheries in a cool, soft light. Warm light spills out of the building doorway and illuminates the windows. The painterly exterior belies the restless sounds emanating from the interior, where angry union members pack the processing floor. Javier Gonzalez and a few other Cubans segregate near the back. Javier's dark eyes dart nervously across the crowd. His light brown complexion sparkles with dewy perspiration. Although on guard, Javier stands firmly in place next to the aisle while disregarding those passing by who pretend to accidentally bump into him and make ill-toned remarks. Get out of our waters. Go back to Miami. Go back to Cuba. Two portable quartz lights on stands blaze to life and bathe the room in a harsh glare. Everyone's attention is on Randy Bourne, with a news film camera poised on his shoulder and Fred Hammond at his side. Rod Stillwell steps up on a short stack of pallets, which serve as a meeting platform.
Evening, ladies.
A few nervous guffaws break some tension in the room.
There's a lot to cover. Last meeting was pretty simple. Darryl, you want to read them minutes?
Darryl Collier, a very short and wiry character, steps up on the short stack of pallets. The heckler shouts,
"Hey, Darryl, stand up when you talk."
Light laughter echoes around the room. The crowd never completely quiets down. Darryl pulls a small wad of blue-lined notebook paper from his shirt pocket, unfolds it, and peers at his penciled writing for a moment, almost if he's never seen it before. His face relaxes with recognition. The men shift on their feet. Finally, Darryl takes a lungful of air and opens his mouth. The men brace themselves.
"The minutes of the last meeting,"
he declares. Darryl's voice marks him as a notable character in the Keys. It sounds like air forced through a pipe, past a serious dent, and across sandpaper. It's wheezy with random high-pitched whining sounds. To make hearing him even more of a challenge, Darryl can't seem to speak at a volume much more than a stage whisper. Someone remarked that Darryl's voice sounded like something just this side of a death rattle. The gathering slowly inches forward, and some old salts cock their heads to favor their best ear.
"Sounds good to me,"
Rod announces when Darryl finishes. A few men suppress a chuckle.
"Let's set the minutes."
Rod raises his hand and the rest follow suit.
"Now, as planned, we're going to deal with the federal fish traps ban."
Rod forces himself to announce casually, but the room won't have it. This new federal regulation prohibits wire fish traps fishermen have used for years to catch fish, to eat, or bait lobster traps. By now, the union membership mood rises past simmering distaste to a near boil.
"We got a special speaker from D.C.
Rod nods at the back of the room where Captain Pembroke seems to have magically appeared. All turn to see Pembroke in his Coast Guard dress whites, which seem to light up that dark area. There's confusion, as if the gang thinks in unison, "What's Pembroke doing here?" Pembroke nods to Rod and opens the door. Katherine Stillwell confidently strides in. She glows in her pleated white dress and white pumps, topped by her stylish long blonde locks. Erric fondly and painfully remembers how gracefully Katherine walks. Her head floats on an even keel without bobbing up and down. Her movements seem played back from a movie projected in elegant slow motion as she navigates to the front of the meeting. The red-faced fishermen spoil for a scrap, but stand silent, shocked and confused. Veins in their necks stand out throbbing with anger, but they can't fight a pretty feminine woman, especially if she's Stillwell's long-lost daughter. The air turns a tint of blue with whispered swearing, both out of anger and in awe. Erric, Jack, and Catbait stare in shock.
"Good evening, gentlemen."
Katherine's pleasingly smooth voice calms their angry hearts.
I represent the Environmental Protection Agency from Washington, D.C.
Eric's ears deafen to the words, and he dreams with his eyes open for the rest of the presentation. His inner voice blurts out, God, she's still so gorgeous. Startled, Eric looks around, thinking someone might have heard him. He breathes a sigh of relief to find everyone has glued their attention on Katherine and are unaware of his lovesick stupor.
So I've detailed our positive intent behind this regulation and leave it to you to respond.
Katherine finishes. A murmured hubbub ensues until Stillwell gets the crowd's attention.
I think we ought to get on paper something to say about each of these points and send that letter from us all to Washington. Otherwise, we'll be here all night and not get much done. Do I hear a motion to write a letter? I'll make that motion,
Eric asserts.
I'll second this motion.
Javier Jimenez shouts from the back. Heads spin, and mixed emotions pass for the assembly of faces.
Call the vote,
Catbait announces. Distracted from Javier, the crowd quizzes over the fact that Catbait's usually soft voice rises to the rafters and fills the room with calm resolve. Rod takes advantage of the momentum.
All those for it?
In reply, the crowd yells in unity,
Aye.
Those against? No one hears anything except water-lapping sounds from beneath the floorboards. Lacking a hammer and gavel, Rod smacks his hands together, making the judgment a done deal.
Passed, okay? The last item.
Stillwell carefully surveys the room to make sure he has everyone's attention.
We all know about the Bahamas taking John's traps and what happened to him. Nothing about it's pretty. I hate to say this, but don't think we can do anything about it either.
The attendees erupt into a shouting rabble. Rod attempts to call them to silence. The crowd quiets until Jack takes advantage of this eye in the storm.
Let's organize a flotilla to rescue the traps.
Pandemonium breaks loose. The hurricane resumes at a full force 5. During the ruckus, Jack throws punches. It spreads like a John Wayne Western movie bar brawl. Rod breaks up the main scuffle, which centers on Jack. Eric carefully assists while making no effort to hide his disgust at Jack's behavior. He realizes that Jack's mercurial moods rise and pass quickly and impetuously. Eric makes a sudden connection, which brightens his assessment of his brother. Jack's like the Apostle Peter, who loves Christ but also acts impulsively. Physical and verbal squabbles continue until Rod mounts the crude platform with a loose 2x4 and methodically whacks a support beam. Whack, whack, whack. Finally, the pandemonium stills.
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Rod evenly but firmly declares. Angry but resigned, voices choked with emotion rapidly respond.
Second. Vote.
Stillwell calls out.
All for?
Half-hearted voices respond.
Aye.
Not waiting for nays, Rod announces,
Meeting adjourned.
but as he raises his hands to clap a final pronouncement, he pauses in midair.
First, could we all bow our heads and remember our good friend, John Thorman?
The men all grimly close their eyes and assume the stance of prayer. A scant few bow their heads and become aware of their own breathing and heartbeat while they earnestly pray. A few moments later, Rod breaks the solemn silence.
Lord, I thank you for making John my friend. Well, everybody's friend. Bless his wife and family in this hard time. Amen.
He resolutely claps his hands together, signaling both a definite amen and the end of the meeting. The crowd quietly converses and mingles among themselves. If Javier Gonzalez was wearing a hat, it would be in his hands as he quietly approaches Eric. If there's anything we can do, please let us know. Por favor? Somewhat taken aback, Eric makes solid eye contact in silence, giving his answer heartfelt weight. Yes, I will. I really needed to hear that. Thanks, Javier. Gonzalez departs and Fred Hammond takes his place.
Eric Thorman, I'm Fred Hammond, reporter for Channel 4.
Eric manages a smile as he mimics Fred's on-air sign-off.
This is Fred Hammond. Yeah, this is me.
They chuckle together.
Hey, I'd like to talk to you on film about the lobster trap situation, say, early tomorrow?
Eric latches upon the opportunity to shine a spotlight on his plight.
Yeah, good idea. How about my place, 7:30? Done. Randy and I will be there.
Eric approaches Katherine, who's been patiently waiting at a discreet distance.
Hello, stranger.
Eric hears a slight tremor in his voice.
Hello yourself.
She responds carefully.
Sorry about your father.
There's a short yet painful pause while Eric looks elsewhere and turns back to her.
How about a walk along the docks?
Eric manages.
That's a good idea.
Katherine finishes. They stroll in silence, taking in the sights and smells on the pier, not daring to acknowledge their stolen glances at each other.
I've really missed you,
Eric finally admits.
I missed you too, Eric.
Eric's head is swimming in deep water. He has to cut to the chase. He sees no other way.
So, where did you go, and why?
Direct and to the point. That's the Eric I know, and I'm glad that hasn't changed.
I'm just trying to let you know what's going on in my head, but I can't seem to make much sense of it anyway. Eric struggles.
You're not alone, Ricky.
Eric's heart warms at her pet nickname for him. He hopes to return the feeling.
It's good to be with you, even just for a few minutes, Kath.
Katherine smiles warmly at him, walks a few steps forming her next words, and stops to face him.
We have a lot of ground to cover. I don't think one night's going to do it. Besides, I have a phone call to make.
Eric takes this in, sighs, and resigns with a compromised smile.
I guess that's a good night. Until next time?
Katherine smiles with her lips in a subtle, quirky twist.
I guess that's good night, Captain Trapp.
They chortle under their breaths. Although they unconsciously incline their bodies toward each other, a pregnant pause underlines their reluctance to touch. Eric answers,
Yes, good night, Missy.
Katherine continues to smile as she turns and glides into the night.